Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world, one book at a time. We have this habit of thinking biology is destiny, that it determines our social behavior. But today, we're going to dig into a book that really challenges that whole idea.
So we're always looking to the animal kingdom for clues about ourselves, right? There's this really powerful idea out there that whatever animals do is natural. And because it's natural, it must be some kind of blueprint for how we should organize our own societies.
And that leads to a huge assumption, doesn't it? That if something is natural, well, it's got to be good. Or, at the very least, it's inevitable, so we might as well accept it. But is that actually true? Let's really dig into that question.
I'm sure you've heard this stuff before. Stand up straight with your shoulders back, because that's what the dominant lobsters do. It's such a simple, catchy idea, isn't it? You just find an animal that seems to back up a social structure you already like, and bam, you call it biological proof.
But hang on a second. What if that's not, actual science? What if it's just a convenient story we tell ourselves using biology as a handy justification? What if this entire way of thinking is built on one giant, fundamental error?
So, to really get to the bottom of this error, we're going to turn to a book that just tackles it head-on. And trust me, it uses some absolutely wild examples from the natural world to do it.
Okay, so the book we're diving into is Phallacy by Emily Willingham, and her central idea is that using animal biology to justify our own behavior is a huge logical error, a fallacy, and yeah, that's spelled with a PH.
All right, here's the absolute core of it. The fallacy is this mistake we make when we see something in nature and then jump to the conclusion that that's how things should be for us humans. It's mixing up a simple observation with a moral justification.
So let's break this down. Why exactly is this an error? Well, it turns out there are a few key ingredients that make up this whole faulty way of thinking.
First up is a classic logical mistake you might have even heard of, the appeal to nature fallacy. It's this super simple but totally flawed idea that anything natural is automatically good or right. I mean, come on, nature is also packed with parasites, cannibalism, and all sorts of horrible diseases. We don't exactly look at those and say, yeah, let's do that.
And this kind of thinking leads directly to another problem: cherry picking. It becomes so easy to just ignore the millions of species that totally contradict the story we want to tell, and instead we just laser focus on the one animal that seems to prove our point.
Willingham has such a great example of this. The people who love to talk about the lobster's dominance hierarchy, they often kind of forget to mention that a huge part of lobster social life involves squirting pee at each other out of their heads. So I guess the question is, should we be modeling that part too?
The reality is, nature doesn't give us one single neat blueprint. It gives us millions of them. It's just this explosion of bizarre, creative, and totally contradictory ways to solve the basic problems of staying alive and making more of yourself.
I mean, just take a look at the insane variety in reproductive anatomy alone. You've got species with penis bones, actual bones, shaped like tridents and scrapers. Then you have primate penises that look like spades. There's just no single natural design. It's pure, wonderful, chaotic diversity.
Oh, and believe me, it gets way weirder. A flea has this super long, coiled organ. A common snail has a structure that looks like Medusa's head. It was so bizarre that scientists who first saw it thought it was a parasite. So to look at any of this and pick one, just one, and say that's the model for humans is, well, it's just completely absurd.
And the last piece of this puzzle is our own cultural bias. We can't help but see data through the lens of our own assumptions. Willingham points to this famous stripper study. So the observation was that women earned fewer tips when they were on their period. The conclusion from the mostly male researchers: whoa, men must be subconsciously detecting that they're not fertile. But they kind of skipped over a much simpler explanation, right? Like maybe, just maybe, women who are feeling sick from cramps or bloating just don't perform as well. It's a perfect example of finding the answer you were already looking for.
Here's a good way to think about it. Imagine the incredible diversity of life on Earth is like a giant museum, just filled with millions and millions of exhibits. Well, using the lobster to justify human society is like walking into that entire museum, ignoring every single room, and just planting yourself in front of one tiny display case and declaring, yep, this explains all of art history.
Okay, so where does all this leave us? What's the takeaway? How does understanding this fallacy actually change how we see the world?
It really all boils down to one crucial distinction. Biology describes things. It tells us what is. It can tell you all about how a lion hunts, for example. But what it can't do, when it never does, is tell us what ought to be. There are no moral instructions written in our DNA.
And that is why this matters so much. Once you can separate is from ought, you've suddenly got this incredibly powerful tool for thinking critically. So the next time you hear somebody use an animal to justify some social setup, talking about aggression or inequality or hierarchies, you'll be able to spot the fallacy immediately. You'll see it for what it is, not a scientific fact, but a justification somebody chose to make.
So everything we've talked about here comes from the fascinating work of Emily Willingham in her book, Phallacy. If any of this has piqued your curiosity, I seriously recommend you grab the book or even just borrow it from your local library. It's a fantastic deep dive.
For the full long-form deep dive into this book and its ideas, follow the link in the description. If you enjoy systems-level analysis like this, please subscribe and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.